What is it? Who has it? It must be important we take the whole month of June to celebrate it. Pride is often a term associated with the queer community, and many people think it's used to mean pride in being queer. But in reality, it really means having pride and being open about one's identity in the face of adversity. And the queer community has faced a lot of adversity. Yeah. But it's not all bad, quite the opposite in fact. There has been so much progress just in the past decade or so. Massachusetts became the first state to legalize gay marriage in 2004. Gay marriage was legalized at a nationwide level in 2015, and many transgender students have gained the right to use the bathroom of their choice. We're living the most accepting era in history.
How did this happen?
Good question, Bill. Thanks for asking. The credit for much of our movements and progress go to the activists of the 1960s and 70s. So much changed in this era, but to really grasp what exactly changed, we have to go back even further to the origins of gay culture in America. Introducing a very brief, very gay history. There wasn't much of a gay community before the late 19th century. They were sparse and scattered across the country. In the late 1800s to early 1900s, New York City became the main gay hub of America. Gay bars, clubs, and social events attracted people who felt like they had no place in the world. The term gay wasn't even used until 1930s, when it started being used as a kind of secret code word to identify other homosexuals. They chose the word gay to represent the fun, jovial attitude the community had in the face of adversity. The code words and secrecy weren't just for fun. They used them to protect themselves against the real dangers they faced, because the sources of that adversity had some very, very different names for them. Name-calling was the least of their problems. A queer person was at risk of losing their job, family, or even their life. And you thought Americans hated Herbert Hoover because they were broke? Well, the gay community really hated Hoover because they were broke and targets of his program to use the FBI to prosecute sexual deviants. Queer people had no choice except to lay low, keep their heads down, and try to live their lives the best they could until eventually something changed. They started to fight back. The first wave of gay activism was called the homophile movement, and it was inspired by the civil rights movement of the same era. Groups in these movements were mostly against government agencies responsible for prosecuting gay individuals. Many of them focused more on creating safe places where people could be themselves. One of these groups was the Daughters of Bilitis. The DOB was a lesbian organization founded by a lesbian couple, Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. It was the first of its kind and set many precedents for future lesbian and bisexual groups. Despite its lack of political affiliation, it often worked closely with its more political counterpart for gay men, the Mattachine Society. Together they shaped the gay activism scene of the early 60s and continued to support the movement in the future. We're now going to be moving on into the late 60s, more specifically a single event that transformed the gay rights movement forever. That event was the Stonewall riots that started June 28th, 1969. It all started when New York police raided a gay bar called the Stonewall in Greenwich Village. At first there was nothing unusual about the raid. Customers were forced out of the venue with excessive brutality, and cross-dressers were taken to the bathrooms and examined to determine if they were indeed men. Some patrons reported experiencing sexual harassment from the officers. The trouble started with a single angry drag queen. Patrons would usually scatter into the night, but that night they hung around to witness the drag queen resisting an officer. They cheered as another man in a police car jumped out and escaped. Eventually more patrons started resisting as it quickly escalated into a riot. The crowds threw trash at the police and the police attempted to beat the crowd back. Someone even started using a parking meter as a battering ram. The riot lasted 6 days, involving thousands of people and attracting mass media attention. No one knew it yet, but the attitude of the queer community changed after it was all over. Suddenly, people were ready to fight for their rights and acceptance into society. Stonewall sparked the next wave of gay rights known as the Gay Liberation Movement. One of the things that came from the GLM was the term coming out of the closet. It was created in order to frame being gay as something as normal as walking out of a closet. This movement was even more heavily influenced by the civil rights movement. Much like the homophile movement, the GLM still tried to create safe spaces like bars and clubs, but they took it a step further and organized protests, parades, social events, and other campaigns. They even started to get results. December 15th, 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. In 1974, Elaine Nobel was the first publicly gay person elected to state office in Massachusetts. In 1975, the first gay rights bill was introduced at the federal level, but unfortunately, it was never taken into consideration. They may seem small now, but these were big achievements back then. The most significant effect the gay liberation movement had was giving hope to a group of people who felt like they had no voice or no support for so long. Queer people were finally seeing a platform on which they could show America that they are just as deserving of rights as anybody else. So that was the origins of the gay rights movement, but it's been 50 years since then. Where are we now? Well, I asked some queer individuals here at Minnetonka where they think we are, based on their experiences, and this is what they said. I haven't encountered any major issues. I'm just mildly uncomfortable most of the time. The rights are there, it just isn't culturally acceptable yet. I think a major portion of male culture is rooted in the idea that femininity is degrading or inferior, so I feel the need to repress those aspects of my personality in order to conform better with the general population. And this definitely relates to gay men and, to the larger extent, being characterized as feminine, so sometimes I feel isolated when expressing myself in everyday life. It's nice and cozy here in the closet. Systemically, I think we're going in the right direction, but socially we still provide platforms for people to bully and harass people. Yeet. I got a lot more answers similar to these. They're reassuring in the sense that people have become more comfortable with the knowledge that their rights are protected, but they're also sort of unnerving to know that even in our relatively accepting community, people still feel uncomfortable, unsafe, and feel as though they need to hide certain aspects of themselves. It's hard to comprehend unless it's something you've experienced, but I think this is something we all have gone through in some sense. With that in mind, it's terrible to think people are still afraid to be who they are. We have a lot to be proud of, but the reason we still celebrate Pride Month is because people are still trying to be themselves in the face of adversity.